It was called the most brutal and shocking family massacre New Zealand had ever seen. The investigation uncovered lies, secrets, and ultimately huge controversy. There's some crazy twists in this case, so buckle up. It was June 1994 in Dunedin, New Zealand. Robin and Margaret Bain were a married couple with 4 children. Their firstborn was David, aged 22 at the time in question, and there was also Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen, aged 19, 18, and 14. Now, the family was far from a perfect family unit. When visitors popped in, they would often note how absolutely appalling the family home looked. It was a complete pigsty. There was stuff everywhere. It was so cluttered, and it was clearly they were hoarders. And Robin and Margaret even argued like cat and dog in front of other people. It was very clear that their relationship was extremely strained. She would say that she felt Robin was an evil spirit and even sometimes joked that she wished she could kill him. And like with most family dynamics when the parents don't get on, the children tended to side with one or the other. Now, David was really way closer with his mum than his dad. He often argued with his dad on behalf of his mum. But Laniette was closer to her dad, so it just turned this whole family really dysfunctional. And it actually reportedly got so bad that there was a little caravan outside of the family home, and I don't know exactly who it was, the mum or the dad, but one of them used to sleep outside in the caravan. There was just a real divide going on, and then on the 20th of June that year, something horrific would unfold. At 7:09 a.m, a frantic call came into police, and I've listened to this phone call. It really is very eerie. It almost sounds like he's crying and shuddering, and he says, "Help, they're all dead. I can't believe it, they're all dead." And the operator's like, "Who's dead?" And he said, "My whole family's dead." Now, most of the family members were all deceased in their beds, except for the dad, Robin. He was deceased in the lounge, and Stephen had seemingly had a struggle in his bedroom with the perpetrator and had been killed on the floor. They'd all been shot with David's shotgun. Now, the only surviving family member was David, one of the children, but did this mean he was the killer? Now, the weapon that had been used, as I said, did belong to David, and it was found next to Robin, the dad. So this either meant that Robin was the perpetrator and he'd unalived himself and let David walk free, or David was the killer and maybe he'd staged it. Investigators had to scour the scene for more clues, and they soon found one on the family computer. It was a message typed on the screen that read, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserves to stay." So news spread in the community about this horrific tragedy, and people were really torn whether they believed David was the killer or Robin was the killer. My first thought was, why would the dad type out this message for David when he and David really didn't get along? Police needed to bring in experts to determine the truth. So blood pattern experts felt that where the blood was suggested that Robin had been moved slightly after his death, which would lead them to believe that David was the killer. And the weapon was actually pretty long, so the experts had to figure out whether it was actually feasible that Robin had actually used this to unalive himself. And they decided it would be almost impossible due to the angle and the length. And strangely, Robin had no one else's blood on him when he was found. If he'd gone around killing his family, surely he would have blood spatter on him. Especially from Stephen, because Stephen put up a real fight. So then officers questioned David about where he'd been that morning. How come he'd just avoided this tragedy? David said that he'd been out on his morning paper round, and it was verified that he did go and do that morning. David interestingly admitted to police he and his dad had argued the night of the murder over something trivial. So why would Robin leave him to stay alive? David said that he'd come back home at around 6:42 a.m. from his paper round, and a witness did confirm that they did see him entering the home at 6:40ish. But forensic teams then figured out that the computer in the home had only been switched on at 6:44 a.m. after he came home. So David's timeline just wasn't really making sense. Obviously, this note had been typed after David got home. The next thing that happened is absolutely wild. 17 days after the massacre, the Bain family relatives decided to burn the family home down. Now, they said they did this because they didn't want people potentially breaking in and burning it down or ruining the family home, but that doesn't make sense. Why would you then go and do that anyway? This fire obviously destroyed so much more evidence that could potentially have been found. Now, David was arrested and charged with the murders, and when he was examined closely, the police found that he did actually have some injuries on his person that he couldn't explain. But these probably could be explained by the fact that there was a bit of a struggle with Stephen. There was also blood in the laundry room of the family home, indicating to investigators that the killer had made an effort to go and wash his clothes and change after the killings. So why would Robin have done that if he was just going to unalive himself? And if you remember, David apparently came home at around 6:40, give or take a few minutes, but he didn't actually make the phone call to emergency services until 7:09. So what was he doing during that period of time? Well, he claimed that he zoned out. I mean, passed out, I could believe, but zoned out and didn't just call emergency services straight away sounds a bit fishy. Prosecutors later argued that David didn't get on with his dad, so it made sense